There is a disturbing irony at the center of the Romanov collapse, and it is not found in the gunshots in a Siberian basement, nor in the shadowy figure of Rasputin, nor even in the catastrophe of the First World War. The deeper irony lies somewhere quieter and far more human. The Russian Empire did not fall amid marital betrayal or palace intrigue. It did not disintegrate because its sovereign couple despised one another or competed for dominance. It collapsed while Nicholas II and Alexandra were bound together by a devotion so intense that it reshaped how they perceived reality itself. At the very moment when Russia required strategic clarity, adaptive leadership, and psychological resilience, its emperor and empress were reinforcing an emotional refuge between them, a refuge that gradually became more real to them than the empire outside its walls. The tragedy, therefore, was not born from hatred, rivalry, or scandal, but from a private world that became stronger precisely as the public world around them began to fracture. Nicholas was not temperamentally suited to the kind of political modernity that the 20th century demanded. He inherited a throne shaped by centuries of autocratic ritual, yet he possessed none of the transformative instincts of Peter the Great, nor the brutal consolidating force of Ivan IV. He was neither visionary nor tyrant in the classical sense. He was conscientious, courteous, deeply attached to family life, and quietly uncomfortable with the theater of power that autocracy required. Political maneuvering exhausted him. Ideological influence did not interest him. He viewed sovereignty less as a demanding vocation and more as a sacred inheritance passed down through blood and tradition. In Alexandra, he did not find a strategist who might guide him through the labyrinth of imperial politics, but something far more personally reassuring: emotional certainty. Their relationship became a space where doubt could dissolve, where the complexity of governing a vast and restless empire could be softened by affection, faith, and mutual reassurance. Alexandra's psychological formation is essential to understanding the dynamic that followed. Born into European royalty but marked early by trauma, she grew up in an atmosphere where illness and death were never distant abstractions. Hemophilia haunted her family lineage. Loss was not theoretical, it was intimate, visible, and frighteningly unpredictable. When she married Nicholas and entered Russia, she did so with deep devotion, but also with a profound sense of vulnerability. She loved her husband fiercely, yet she never felt fully accepted by the Russian court. She struggled with the language and with the culture. The subtle social codes of the Russian aristocracy, codes that quietly sustained political legitimacy, remained elusive to her. That sense of alienation did not turn her outward into a manipulator of court politics. Instead, it pushed her inward. Gradually, the marriage became her fortress, a protected emotional territory where loyalty was unquestioned and the uncertainties of Russian society could be kept at a distance. Then, Alexei was born, and the fragile balance of the imperial household shifted forever. The birth of their heir should have secured the dynasty, yet, instead, it introduced a permanent tremor beneath the throne. When hemophilia revealed itself in the young boy, Alexandra experienced not only maternal fear, but crushing guilt. She believed, whether rationally or not, that she had transmitted weakness directly into the bloodstream of the empire itself. The future of 3 centuries of Romanov rule now rested on a child who could bleed to death from a minor fall. From that moment onward, The boundary between governance and motherhood dissolved within her mind. Protecting Alexei became indistinguishable from protecting Russia's future. Any threat to him carried existential weight, transforming personal anxiety into a political urgency. It was within this psychological landscape that Rasputin emerged as a figure of extraordinary importance. His influence did not arise solely from mysticism or charisma. Rather, he offered Alexandra something far more powerful: the illusion of control in a situation that felt utterly uncontrollable. When physicians failed to halt one of Alexei's hemorrhages and Rasputin's presence coincided with improvement, desperation fused with faith. Whether through calming the household or discouraging invasive treatments that worsened bleeding, his involvement appeared miraculous. For Alexandra, removing Rasputin would have meant abandoning the only perceived bridge between divine will and her son's survival. Criticism of him, therefore, ceased to be political disagreement. It became moral aggression, even spiritual betrayal. Nicholas, observing the growing scandal surrounding Rasputin, found himself trapped in a conflict that was less political than personal. He may have recognized the damage to the monarchy's credibility, yet he also saw his wife's emotional fragility. Destabilizing her seemed more dangerous to him than enduring public criticism. His instinct, profoundly human and deeply understandable, was to preserve emotional equilibrium within his family. Yet, when that instinct guided imperial governance, the consequences became disastrous. Decisions affecting millions of people were increasingly filtered through the intimate emotional world of a marriage. When the First World War erupted, the fragility of this arrangement was exposed under immense pressure. Russia entered the conflict under the weight of alliance obligations and national prestige, but the war that followed bore little resemblance to the conflicts European monarchies had previously known. Industrial warfare demanded logistical sophistication, centralized coordination, and immense industrial capacity. Russia struggled to meet these demands. Early defeats at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes shattered illusions of quick victory. Casualty lists grew beyond comprehension. Ammunition shortages became routine. Railway networks faltered. Urban populations began to fear the strain of a war that consumed resources faster than the empire could replenish them. Nicholas' decision to assume personal command of the army in 1915 was shaped by psychology as much as strategy. Unable to silence critics at court, he sought to demonstrate leadership directly on the battlefield. By taking command, he hoped to reclaim agency and restore confidence in the monarchy. Yet, the decision tethered his personal authority to military outcomes he could not control. Every defeat now reflected directly upon the emperor himself. At the same time, his departure from Petrograd left Alexandra as the symbolic center of government, a development that intensified suspicion toward her German origins and strengthened the perception that Rasputin wielded influence within the imperial court. As Russia's military situation deteriorated, Nicholas and Alexandra's private correspondence became increasingly intimate and spiritually reassuring. The letters were filled with affection, prayer, and encouragement. During moments of national crisis, they strengthened one another's certainty that faith and loyalty would ultimately prevail. The outside world, filled with criticism and unrest, gradually came to appear as hostile noise. Their marriage became sanctuary, yet sanctuary, when governing a vast and restless empire, can easily transform into isolation. By 1916, the strain upon Russian society had become severe. Industrial workers endured exhausting hours and diminishing food supplies. Inflation eroded wages. Transportation breakdowns deepened shortages in major cities. Rumors about Rasputin's influence spread beyond aristocratic saloons into factories and streets. When he was assassinated by nobles in December 1916, the act was born from desperation, an attempt to restore credibility to a monarchy that seemed increasingly disconnected from reality. Instead, it exposed the fragmentation of the ruling elite. Alexandra experienced the murder not as political correction, but as spiritual trauma. Nicholas interpreted it as evidence that loyalty within the aristocracy itself was dissolving. The February Revolution did not arrive as a sudden explosion. It accumulated slowly, like pressure building beneath frozen water. Bread riots expanded into mass demonstrations. Soldiers hesitated to fire upon civilians. Authority thinned across the capital. Nicholas attempted to return to Petrograd, yet railway lines were blocked. Military commanders advised abdication, recognizing that the autocracy had lost the loyalty necessary to sustain itself. The empire ended not with dramatic defiance, but with subdued resignation. Nicholas signed the document that ended 3 centuries of Romanov rule. In captivity, a strange intimacy emerged, stripped of ceremony and power. Nicholas and Alexandra withdrew completely into family line. They read scripture together, walked within restricted grounds, and maintained routines for their children. Observers later remarked upon their calm composure. Deprived of empire, they preserved marriage. Yet history does not reward private harmony when public responsibilities collapses. Their execution in July 1918 was chaotic and brutal, but its meaning extended far beyond the violence itself. What died in that basement was not merely a dynasty, it was a worldview that could not reconcile emotional retreat with structural transformation. The 20th century demanded bureaucratic competence, political reform, and an understanding of mass politics. Nicholas and Alexandra governed instead through faith, loyalty, and a moral language rooted in 19th century autocracy. The tragedy, therefore, lies not in monstrous cruelty, but in sincerity. Their letters reveal conviction rather than cynicism. They believed suffering purified nations. They believed loyalty was sacred. They believed dissent represented moral corruption rather than political warning. In reassuring one another, they replaced empirical assessment with emotional affirmation. Because their love was genuine, their echo chamber became nearly impenetrable. The crisis engulfing Russia, military defeat, economic collapse, revolutionary agitation, were interpreted as spiritual trials rather than evidence of systemic failure. And so the bitter symmetry of their story remains. They loved each other as their empire burned, not metaphorically, but in a painfully literal sense. Cities trembled with unrest, railways clogged with chaos, soldiers retreated from collapsing fronts, and legitimacy dissolved before their own eyes. Their private world remained coherent until the very end. The public world they were entrusted to guide did not. Within that divergence lies one of the most haunting ironies of the 20th century, a dynasty undone not by hatred or betrayal, but by the quiet conviction that love and faith could substitute for structural change in an age that no longer tolerated illusion. Hi guys, I'm Arthur, the creator of War Never Changes. I hope you've liked this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel, leaving your like, and also to activate the bell for notifications so you can see our newest videos, right? Um, as you guys already know, I'm a Brazilian medical student, and my dream, my quest, is for the revalidation in the US, to be a US doctor, right? Via the USMLE steps. But for that purpose, I need money, and I don't have money, so here am I. And for that purpose, I'm selling my newest ebook. It is called Love in No Man's Land: 9 True Love Stories from the First World War, right? It contains 2 main editions. The collector's edition, which contains the main book with 1 additional war love story, the 10th story, right? It also has exclusive artwork for all of our war love stories. You also get a customized 100 pages notebook for War Never Changes. You also get an insignia, the War Lover insignia. So it proves that you fought with me in this first phase project, right? And it also has some private intel. Private intel number 1. What does it contain? I cannot tell you because it is private, confidential. Only those who buy it will know. This edition, it contains only 2,500 units left, so you should run, you should buy it fast, right? Please consider buying it. But if you don't want to buy it, shame on you, actually. But it also has a standard edition. It costs only $10, and it contains the main book with 9 more love stories. So if you're interested, please consider checking the description below, the link for the book. And I hope I see you in the next videos. So thank you once more, and always remember, war never changes.